Belle, please. How can we believe anything you say now?
I have lost everything.
Remember this?
You didn't have brain cancer.
The Belle Gibson train crash.
Would you accept that you're a pathological liar?
On 60 Minutes.
Don't put that camera up at me.
When you hear those claims, 3 heart operations, 2 cardiac arrests, died twice and a brain tumour.
Sick to my gut.
Her lies about beating cancer outraged the world.
She's known as the biggest fraudster on Instagram.
It's embarrassing.
But closer to home,
I'm angry.
it was her big brother who really suffered.
She'll never tell the truth.
Now, Nick Gibson wants his say.
You want your sister to go to jail?
Yeah, to get a wake-up call.
The story of Belle Gibson continues. Welcome to Extra Minutes podcast. I'm Tara Brown and this is Dimity, of course.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about, of course, if you haven't seen this story, you can catch it on 9 Now or YouTube. But as I said, the story of Belle Gibson continues.
Did it all come back to you just then?
Yes, how could you forget
That
that?
interview still following you?
You're still haunting me. No, it's fascinating, but I'm interested to hear about Belle's brother and his view on his sister.
Yeah, I think that interview has had such a profound impact on Nick Gibson, him himself, because that was the moment I think that he realised exactly what his sister had done. And I think that was the moment that night that interview ran was a really a big turning point for him. And from there, I don't think his life has ever been the same after that night, after he watched that on the program.
But surely he had some idea of what his sister was capable of or what she'd been up to.
Look, he says that growing up, they had a really tight childhood. They grew up in suburban Brisbane. He recalls great memories, like lots of children riding their bikes around the streets, running around the neighbourhood, playing with all of the other kids in the neighbourhood every afternoon after school. And it was funny because when we sat down, he started off the interview like that. And he was really fond and talking very nicely of his sister.
So they were super close as kids, he said.
Yeah, and he says that he noticed a change in his sister overnight. That they got to being teenagers, but just a bit before, 11, 12, 13, he says around that age, his sister started to change. She became gothic, she started hanging out with different people, and he says, it was really sad. He said it felt like he had lost his sister overnight, that she left the house one day and then she came back and she was just a different person. And I think from there, their relationship has never been the same. The sister that he knew, he's never had again. And I think things just spiraled. I don't think Nick Gibson ever imagined that her life would spiral or that she would be capable of anything like that. He would say she would do things like fake mum's signature at school and lie about that she always had, the ability to lie and get out of things and try and sweep things under the carpet.
So was that the change that he saw, this ability to be dishonest, this ease with lying?
I think she just became a troubled teenager is what he's talking about.
Yeah, well, that's different though.
Exactly. So when you talk about growing up, he would say that she would be able to lie to people. But again, I don't think the magnitude of what eventuated he would ever have imagined that his sister would be capable of that.
No. Was there any element of that in him?
Well, he would definitely tell you no. I think they're two very different people. I mean, the Belle that we got to know in your interview, she's out there. Anybody who's capable of running an app and producing a cookbook and so publicly sharing a story. I would say Nick is the complete opposite person to that. He's an introvert. He's shy. He was even shy when I first got there and really had to make him feel comfortable because he was in a situation he hadn't really been in before. And it is daunting sitting down and in an interview chair with all the lights and the production that goes with that. So that was quite daunting for him.
Yeah, I mean, you're compelling, Dim, of course. So why wouldn't he do the interview with you? But why did he do it?
I think he's got to a point where he just wanted to have his say. I mean, I think he's got to a point where he wanted to put his story forward and I think he's just angry. I think he's angry at what his sister has done, and I think now with the documentary, but he took part in the documentary and I asked him why he did that and he said, I just want people to know who my sister really is. And I guess that's part of the reason why he wanted to speak out.
You were saying earlier that he went down one path describing his childhood and his relationship with his sister, and then he changed tact at some point.
Yeah.
Did he reveal a side of Belle that was revealed during childhood that wasn't sweet, wasn't close?
Well, I think he thought when he sat down to do the interview that he should do what big brothers should do and be nice about his sister. And I think, very quickly, when my questioning started to change, it was like, well, no, we want to know why you're here and want to know what it is that has put you in that seat today to talk to us. And that's when he, it was really evident really quickly. He would tear up a lot, and it was heartbreaking, whenever he would talk about the impact on his life. I mean, he now says that, people at his work know him. He has people that stop him and ask him questions, and he's like, I'm nothing like her. I don't want to be associated with her. I don't want people to think that I'm capable of doing anything that she can do. Yeah. At the time, at the time of the interview with Belle, one of the sadder elements, I guess, was how she'd treated her brother. We didn't get to speak to Nick at that point, but it was evident that she had described him as having autism. That still hurts him to this day. And I think it married up in the fact that he was, saying that she would call him retard growing up. He openly says, I have trouble reading and writing, but he says he doesn't have autism, and that he told us that he has been to a doctor and the doctor did not diagnose him with autism. But then I thought... What an awful thing to say. I know. And I mean, brothers and sisters can be mean at the best of times, but if he was already struggling with reading and writing, I think that's really stuck with him. And when Belle was talking about stigma, and then you've got Nick saying, well, she used to call me retard, you're like, well, why? Where does that stigma come from? Why? You have to think that it's, could have come from how he would say she's treated him.
You have a very offended brother who claims he has no idea why you would describe him as autistic.
It is heartbreaking. Excuse me. Sorry. It is heartbreaking for me that he still carries stigma.
I don't think that comment means he carries stigma. I mean, he's upset with you for describing him as having autism.
Because he does.
I don't have autism at all, no. Even when I was a kid, she used to call me retard.
But I really saw the emotion that she has in that interview with you when she talks about her brother, that it weighs heavily on her. And whether that's because of how she treated him or their childhood, I mean, they describe two very different childhoods. Yeah, I know. I mean, do you think those tears were genuine? I don't think there's anything genuine that,
exactly.
I think it's guilt. I think those tears are born out
think
of...
Belle Gibson has remorse?
I think that... Oh, well, I think she feels guilty in the way that she may have treated her brother growing up.
Do you think so? She hasn't come out and said, no, he doesn't have autism.
No, she definitely still claims that he has autism and can't face what he, he's himself is basically what she was claiming in the interview. I don't know. You like to think that you look at him and you look at how he's affected, and you would like to think that if he's so affected that she feels something. But does she? Okay, so let's talk about her. Think? Well, no, I don't think she does. I don't know Belle Gibson beyond that interview, obviously, and observing what she's done since. But I don't think there are any actions that she's exhibited, any kind of verbal remorse to indicate that she feels for anyone other than herself. So what do you think her tears are born out of then? Because she gets very upset at that point of the interview. I think she's grasping for answers at that point. I mean, and maybe the family when it gets really personal. I mean, there's one thing to say you did all of this to all of these people online who she can't see and she can't eyeball, but maybe when you bring up her family, it really hits home. So what's her relationship with her family like now? Well, Nick says that he hasn't spoken to her. The last time he saw her was when their mother, Natalie, was dying. She finally came home to Brisbane. He tells horrible stories that she came home and she went to his home, cleaned out the garage without his permission, and then goes as far as to say that she's on her deathbed and jewellery is removed from their dying mum's body. Again, is it, has she fleeced her own mum? And like, what is she capable of?
That's what Nick is saying.
That's what he's saying. Yeah, he's saying that, and all of the sentimental stuff that were in boxes in his garage have all been taken. So she brought a suitcase, packed the suitcase and headed back to Melbourne. And that's the last time he's seen her. That was in 2017. He says they do keep in contact every so often via text message, but it's very just surface, how are the kids? How are you? But I don't know how the relationship will be.
Well, this does not look like she's doing anything to repair that relationship. If her tears were real, don't you think she would have done more to be in touch with her brother, to try to repair?
You would like to think that. Well, yeah, I don't think so. I mean, you don't. What is she doing these days? What is Belle Gibson sitting there doing and thinking with herself? I mean, she was fined $410,000 in the federal court. She hasn't paid a cent and had no repercussions. So what does one think? She doesn't have a job. She says she can't get a job. She hasn't had any consequence. This is the thing. Like, what is it? What will it take for her to be forced to pay that fine? I mean, that's a big sum of money. Even some of it will have some sort of repercussion. I think the community expectation, don't you think, would be that there's got to be some sort of repercussion. If you're fined in the federal court, then what happens to you? Why is she still walking around 7 years on with having not paid it but having also no consequence?
Yeah. So what does Nick think should happen to her?
Well, he thinks that she needs to go to jail. He thinks that the only thing that's going to get through to her is to go to jail. And I think in 2018, the federal judge warned her that if she didn't pay or start to pay some of it, that she could end up in prison or like a raid on her property, which I believe did happen. But then Consumer Affairs Victoria have come out to us and said that they recovered nothing and every cent of that $410,000 is still owed.
It's a big step for a brother to say his sister should go to jail.
You'd think so. I mean, yeah, absolutely. But that's how he feels. And I think he just wants his sister to have to pay some sort of consequence for her actions.
Does he feel that because he wants the reputation of his family to be repaired?
I don't think he thinks that it will ever be repaired. It's a bit of a dead end, I feel, for him. He all he can do is have his moment to speak the truth, which is what he's done, and just try and get on with his life. He's got a wife and a couple of young children. He just works hard. I think it eats at him that, she's getting away. He's, working 6 nights a week, night shift, up against it with the cost of living and everything else. And she's there in Melbourne somehow surviving. And I think it's all those little things that just eat at him and make him more and more angry at his sister.
Did Nick indicate whether there was any suggestion that Belle Gibson suffered from mental illness or any other type of illness?
Well, through his anger, he was saying, she keeps telling me she's, well, actually, he did say, coming back to me, he did say, I don't want to be rude, but I think there's something loose in her head. I think they were the words he used. And he said, I've told her, you need to get help. So he's obviously aware that maybe his sister is potentially unwell and needs help.
So to put it crassly, mad but not bad?
I think he thinks she's very bad. Mad and bad. But I think I think she's told him. I mean, he did say, she says, I'm getting help, but he doesn't believe that she's getting any sort of help. So
just going back a bit, did the family know that Belle claimed she had cancer?
He was basically saying that the first time he found out anything that she had been claiming, because he doesn't have social media.
Right.
So he was saying that he had no idea that she never rung him and said that she was suffering from any sort of cancer. He had no idea that she had this huge online following around the world. That's what he says to me in the interview.
Right.
And says that the first time that he ever found out anything was watching that program. He said he was at home with a friend, and then the friend said, "Mate, isn't that your sister?" And he just said he was shocked and had no idea.
What did the rest of the family know about Belle's health?
Well, I don't think they thought anything was wrong with her. I don't they didn't have any reason to believe that she'd had been unwell, that she'd had any sort of operations. He claims to have had no knowledge of her ever suffering any ill health whatsoever.
Or her claiming to.
Well, her claiming to, yes, exactly. Or her claiming to, exactly.
You had 3 heart operations. You suffered 2 cardiac arrests. You died twice on the operating table. You had a stroke. And you were diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumour and given 4 months to live.
Correct.
Has your sister ever been really unwell, ever suffered a serious disease?
Not what I know of, no.
She's never had any heart operations?
Not what I know of, no.
Never gone into a cardiac arrest twice?
No.
Never died twice?
No.
It was a big thing for him to sit down and do that interview, and he was extremely nervous about it.
Yeah, and he talked about some big emotions. I mean, he used the H word. He didn't want to use it, but at times he hates his sister, and that's a big thing to admit.
Well, he sees the impact that her actions have had. He sees the impact now that it's having on his family. I mean, you know, he's got kids that, you know, he talked about Googling. You know, when I Google my name now, it comes up. Or when I Google my sister, I'm now associated with her. And, you know, it's shame on the family. And he says, you know, he's ashamed of his sister. And that, you know, he wants to turn around and tell her that he hates her. You know, they are big emotions.
What did you think of him? Did you like him?
I did like him. I thought he just was a hard-working man who was just trying to provide for his family. He's working 6 nights a week, doing night shifts, doing as much overtime as he can to give his young family the best life that they can.
And then to be catapulted into the public domain in such a bizarre way and in such an enduring way. I mean, we're still talking about Belle Gibson.
Why did you want to sit here? Like, if you just want to get on with your life and you're so hurt by the fact that, you know, you're always associated with her, why are you doing a public interview? Why are you sitting down and doing that? And he just said, he wants to have his say. I think he just feels like, well, she's just gotten away with all of this and she said all this stuff and she's always teased me as a young child and now she's told the world I'm autistic. He wanted to just have his moment to say, well, no, that's not true. And it's just indicative of the type of person my sister is.
And especially if she's not getting justice, as he deems it. You know, she's not...
She's not paying any consequence.
That's right, there's no consequence. So maybe is this part of that? You know, this is a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, the best consequence that he can give, and maybe he's hoping that it will prompt authorities to knock on Belle Gibson's door again. Maybe that's what he wants to get out of it. But I think he just wants to have some sort of full stop and closure. But I mean, I don't know what that really looks like for Nick Gibson. I mean, he's sick of, you know, guilt by association, but I think it's always, unfortunately, going to follow him.
Yeah, and just to clear it up, did you get any clarification on what measures could still be taken against her? Are there any?
We got a 2-line statement from Consumer Affairs Victoria, basically confirming that it had not been recovered and that they were still pursuing her for unconscionable conduct. So quite weak, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't really give a lot of answers, and it doesn't really give the public much confidence that when you do something so drastic and so hurtful and so impactful that's, you know, and wrong, that's the consequence.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't seem right that, you know, and as Nick says, you know, if that was me and I had taken $410,000 off someone, that it would be fraud and you would be criminally charged and you'd be before a court. Why has that not happened for her? Why does she still walk around and live a normal life? Like, at what point does she become criminally charged by police?
At what point does our interest in her stop? It's such a big story. Yeah.
You might have something to do with that.
No. But I mean, you know, there is, as you say, there's an international documentary. She's, you know, being described as the worst con woman on the internet.
People still talk about it as one of the most memorable 60 Minutes interviews. I mean, people... You know, you've had people that always talk about the Belle Gibson interview. I don't think that's ever going to, and I don't think you can. It's one of those interviews that you could just watch and watch and watch. You know.
Am I meant to say thank you? I think what it exposed was an incredible depth of trickery and lies. You know, ultimately, it's what she was doing that I think has endured. You know. Do you think that, you know, that there is this...
Yeah, but I also think you didn't let her get away with any moment in that. You know, everything was scrutinised and and for somebody who just, you know, they get themselves tangled. Liars get themselves tangled into webs, and she just kept getting more tangled and more tangled. And you're right. Probably that is why she was so distraught and crying in the end. And then, ask her a story about a family and it really tips her over the edge. And
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing with, and you probably experienced this too, is that with people who fabricate, there is always a grain of truth. And that's a hard thing, isn't it, when you're sitting down to interview somebody? It's like, okay, I know that. I think that bit's true, but so do I believe the rest of this? The rest of this is not sounding like it's
well, that's
true.
when she comes to her childhood and she was starting to talk about coming from a broken home and that they moved around a lot. And I think her childhood did have impact. I think there are elements, like you say, there's the elements of truth about their childhood that does upset her and that has stuck with her. But they're reasons, they're not excuses.
No.
And surely there's no excuse for anything she went on to do.
That's one of my biggest fears. Is raising a child in an environment the way that I was raised. My childhood was not, I think, anyone else's degree of normal. It's still not something that I have clear answers for. My family and I were often on the move very frequently.
And you also have a brother who's raised in the same household, who's had a very similar childhood, and he's not a liar.
I said that to him. I said, why did you turn out like you did and Belle turned out like she did? And he said, because I listened to the discipline of my mum. My mum disciplined me, but Belle wouldn't listen. And I think that at that beginning of those high school years, I think she really alienated herself from the family. I don't think she had a lot to do. I mean, I think, she moved out of home at like 12 or 13 with a much older guy. So, I think Belle Gibson detached herself from her family from then, and I don't think it's ever been okay.
I'm still fascinated with the continuing fascination that the world has with her. But I mean, she speaks to our times a little bit, doesn't she, in the sense that we're all hoodwinked. People, bought her wellness app. They bought the book, call it the book, her recipes that appeared to have been taken from the internet.
Because everybody wants an answer. Everybody wants the glossy Instagram. Don't you think? Like that's and it got them in hook, line and sinker. Like it was, people loved it. It's always that. Don't always believe what you see on Instagram. There's always another story to it. But this is a very serious example of that. But yeah, I don't think the fascination with her is ever going to go away. And I think that it's not finished. It hasn't. She's still out there. She's still living a life. When is she actually going to have a consequence? Because clearly, just being her now might weigh on her, but she hasn't actually paid any price for what she did.
No, and Nick couldn't give you any insight into whether she's in fact learned from her.
Well, I don't think so. And I think with what he talks about around their mother's death, I don't think he thinks she's learned anything. I think I said to him when she turned up, what were you thinking? And he said, my immediate thought was, what's she up to? Why is she here?
And they were good questions. No, I mean, to take jewellery from your
dying mum's body. Yeah.
Terrible. Anyway, yeah. All right, Jim. Well, I think that's probably enough on Belle Gibson today.
Enough for now. It's enough for now, but I don't think it's ever going to go away.
No, it's meant to be about Nick Gibson anyway. Yeah. But thank you for the insights. That was great. And you can catch the full story on 9Now or YouTube. Thank you very much for watching and listening.